Hello and welcome to FDLP Collections in a Digital Era, Part 2. My name is Ashla Dahlin. I'm an Outreach Librarian at GPO. Thank you for the invitation to talk to you all about how to make use of GPO catalog record metadata in new and unusual ways. In Part 1, we went through how to understand what GPO metadata actually was, what we have, what we don't have, so that you could better understand which avenue to acquire GPO metadata for whatever type of project you're doing. So for example, we talked about how GPO cataloging in MARC record format began in 1976. We do have content where the publication year predates 1976 that we've since created a MARC catalog record for it, but they are pockets of material. So in other words, if you're trying to do a retrospective cataloging project and your material is from, say, the early 1900s or late 1800s, chances are you're going to have to work with catalog record sets that are outside of GPO's purview, so another utility such as OCLC or through some sort of a vendor for historic catalog records. GPO does have pretty solid catalog records from 1976 to present in MARC record format. However, we have multiple generations of catalog record standards. Obviously, like everyone else, we began with AACR, went to AACR2, and then again to RDA. We also have generations of catalog records that may impact your projects related to the single record approach, which is where there was one catalog record for each format of publications that were issued. Versus the separate records where there is one catalog record for each format. And that, of course, is important for you all to be aware of if you are a library that is trying to make your digital collection work better with your discovery layers. You will notice that this is not the presentation that was given on the 17th. That is because we did have some technical difficulties during the live demo. So we figured it would be better if we just re-recorded it separately here. So today in Part 2, we're going to talk about how to actually acquire a GPO metadata or record set. I'm going to show you two avenues, the CGP on GitHub and FDLP Data Manager or FDM. After that, I'm going to talk to you about how to do two very quick types of projects using Microsoft Office Excel. And then we're going to dive into MarcEdit, which is not a GPO tool, but it's a very useful tool for cracking into catalog records. The projects that we're going to go over include how to create a shelf list or a weeding list, or at least get a head start on a shelf list or weeding list if you don't have catalog records for the content that you're working with. The second project we'll talk about is a sudoc conversion project. We've heard from a couple of libraries that they want to maximize the matching capability in FDLP Exchange. In FDLP Exchange, if somebody says, hey, I need something, they're going to put in a sudoc number of what they need. And the only way it will match on your offer is if you also happen to use that same sudoc number. So we've heard from some libraries that want to take their offers lists, and instead of providing the LC or the DUI call number that they happen to have, they want to find the sudoc number to maximize that matching capability. The third project we will go into is the Export Tab Delimited project. That is where you can export select MARC fields and put it into a spreadsheet format so you can manipulate or work with the data outside of the confines of a catalog record. We'll also look at how to split apart record sets by that new and changed format, which we learned in Part 1 is a kind of a deal breaker for some of you based on your catalog systems. And we'll also look at how to delete older records by publication date, which is another one of those deal breakers for some of you all, a service that MarChive had provided that is no longer available, that being the ability to remove records that predate something that is outside the scope of your collection by the date. All right, so the first thing I'm going to go over is I'm going to go over how to download catalog record sets from GitHub. I give you a link here to the CGP on GitHub. I've also given you a description of some of the collections. You see a link to the LSC and Metadata and Collection Services Information Portal. We call it an FDLP resource guide. I'll give you a tip. It's a libguide. But it does have descriptions and updates of some of the collections found on our CGP on GitHub collections. On the FDLP.gov homepage, we're going to mouse over Depository Tools and then CGP on GitHub. I'll give you a heads up that the CGP on GitHub may be renamed because we now have more than one data repository here. So we started out with one and we started throwing in subject-based collections, which is where it's currently sending you to when you click on that link. We may change where that link goes to in the future because this perhaps is not the most commonly used repository. But you can see here in the subject-based repository, we've got, NIST collection records. We've got a collection set of records for American Indian Alaska Natives. We have the same thing for HBCU, subject-based resources. These are all record sets that were requested by the community, so we went ahead and we created the record set, and they are there for you to download. However, I suspect that most of you, if you're interested in catalog record sets, are probably interested in the monthly loads. So let me scroll down here, and you can see where we refer to some of the other GitHub repositories. The one I'm going to draw attention to is the monthly record files here. So when I click on the monthly record files, we see that you can download all MARC records by month. You can download all of the changed or all of the new. You can download the online changed, that would be the online format changed records, the online format new records, the tangible format changed records, and the tangible format new records. These last four here are new. We just started breaking those out, and it was a request that we got from the Fall Depository Library Council meeting. So these are the monthly loads, which means we put out all of our catalog records that we worked on a monthly basis. We do have the CGP All collection, which is a whole nother repository, but essentially every February we go in and we download the entire CGP. So if you wanted to work with those massive data sets, you could. But the monthly files are here. Let's say you were only interested in getting the new online format records. You could just click into the file folder there. You see that the file name structure is pretty consistent. We have new online records, 202401. It means it's January of 2024. The 499 just means that there's 499 catalog records in that particular record set. So let's say we're interested in just downloading the November file. Just double click on it. And when you see the preview of it, you know that you can go over here and click on the three dots and click download. So that will download that particular catalog record set. It will download as a .mrc file format. However, if you wanted to do, I'm going to jump back up in my breadcrumbs here. If you had wanted to download, say, all of these at one time, if you click on the three dots over here, you notice that there is no download option. So what happens is if you get to that point and you want to download everything that you're seeing, you need to go up higher in the breadcrumbs. So right now I'm in the monthly files. I need to hop up a level. And here's the higher level directory where I can download all of those files. And you can see that the monthly files are just one file folder within this entire zip file. When you see the green button, you know that you can download it. Green button, download zip. All right, so here is that entire zip file. You can see that I've got individual spreadsheets here. Those are those deleted records. We have a zip file within a zip file, and that's actually where we're going to end up, but I just wanted to show you the rest of this file here. We have changed online format records, we have changed tangible format records, we have particular record sets, and so on. Instead of focusing on changed format records that are tangible or the like, I'm just going to actually go into the zip file. And I have a choice of downloading all of the monthly records that are in MarcEdit format, UTF-8 format, and XML format. And I'm just going to double click on the MarcEdit format. And if I wanted to, what I could do is minimize this, check the box there, and drag November to my desktop. I'll close that out, close this out, and I'm really quickly just going to rename this so I don't lose track of what it is. This is GitHub November, all. So that was downloading catalog records on GitHub. Let's talk about how to download catalog records on FDLP Data Manager or FDM. I've given you a link here to an hour-long webinar that we did on FDM. It goes over all of the modules, and each of the modules have different types of metadata that may be of use to you in whatever project you're working on. I also gave you a link here to the largest FDM tutorial, which is a PDF tutorial that goes over all the modules, and then I gave you a link to the individual FDM tutorials as well. On fdlp.gov, under Depository Tools, click on FDLP Data Manager or FDM. This landing page takes you to a description of the different modules, talks about the update frequency, and again gives you the links to the training. So this FDM tag here will take you to that webinar, and this link here will take you to the PDF tutorials. Up at the top though is the link to actually get to FDM, so I click on it. I need to log in real quick. All right, and we are logged into FDM. There are multiple places to download metadata sets. The first being the shelf list and the shipping list modules. I prefer to work with the shelf list module. This works with shipping list data going back to 1997 and does have some pros over working with straight catalog records at times. We'll go over that in a minute. The Marc Records module, though, is where you're definitely going to download Marc catalog records. So let me click on the Marc Records module. And here we have a search interface where we can create a query to query anything in the CGP, because anything in the CGP is going to be found here in FDM. So we can look for particular catalog records by OCLC number. We can look for catalog records by item number, SUDOC number, which we can use wildcard characters, so you can filter by SUDOC stems. You can work with agencies, title words, subject words, shipping list if you want. Yes, you can put in your FDL number here. So this is an advantage of FDM over GitHub. If you want to filter a record set to your current selection profile, you just put your library's number in there, and it knows to filter out the catalog records based on your current selection profile. You can also look at catalog records by format type, so paper, microfiche, online, etc., and also by publication type. So if you're only interested in looking for serials or for monographs, you can do that as well. Catalog record dates is probably where most of you are going to be at, especially if you're trying to set up like a monthly workflow. If you're trying to do a monthly workflow where you're going in and you're downloading the monthly records, I recommend that you just do the 1 year month option. And for example, we downloaded off GitHub the November records, so I say November 2024, and I say get Marc. So this is not filtered by anything else. I'm not looking at any particular type of catalog record, not online format versus tangible. I'm not looking at serials versus monographs or new versus changed. This is important though, because we'll see it later on. On the search results page here in the Marc Records module, you see the OCLC number, the item number, SUDOC number, title, and then there's a URL count and a record date, which we can ignore for the time being. The point being that this search results page contains metadata that we can actually tap into without even using the Marc catalog records. And if I wanted to, I could say export to Excel, and it would export the information that I see displayed. But for the purpose of downloading a catalog record set, let me just quickly click on Download Marc Records. I'll minimize that and drag this to my desktop, and again I am going to just really quickly rename it FDM November all. All right, so that was downloading catalog record sets, one from GitHub, one from FDM. The first project that we're going to dive into working with metadata is a shelf list or a weeding list project of sorts. Basically, the goal is if you don't have cataloging, and so you're not able to create a catalog report, how do you create a shelf list or an inventory of your collection, or how do you create a weeding list, and can we do that with a minimal amount of typing? And the answer is I can't get you everything, but I can get you at least a head start on that process. What we're going to do is we're going to go out to FDM and we're going to take advantage of two modules. We're going to take advantage of the shelf list module as well as the MarcRecords modules. We're going to take advantage of the export to Excel feature in lieu of actually downloading catalog records. And then we're going to mash the two record sets up. You'll see here that I have some notes, and that includes to not customize your report by your selection profile, which seems a little bit odd considering what you're trying to do here, but there's a point, and I'll go over that in a minute. You do need to keep in mind that shipping list and the shelf list module go back to 1997, and the shelf list module is going to have the full shipping list title, which is usually a little bit more complete than the MarcRecord module, because the MarcRecord module, obviously the MarcRecord module has the entire title, but it only displays the 245 subfield A title. It does not display the subtitle, which is contained in the subfield B. So when we just export to Excel, we're not going to get that subfield B information, which is a little bit of a downside, so pro and con there. So this is a visual representation. You see a timeline running down the middle there, and you can see that we have pockets of MARC cataloging prior to 1976. It's just spotty here and there. From 1976 to present, we have MARC cataloging in a MarcRecord format. So do keep in mind that MarcRecords contain piece level or item level information for monographs, but serials only have serial level information in the bibliographic record. That information that the September issue was created, that the October issue was distributed, the November issue was distributed, that information is not contained in the serial record. You will only see the serial level title, and you will only see the serial level SUDOC number, which will be a SUDOC stem, essentially. Contrast that, if you look down below, you can see that we have shipping list metadata going back to 1997. Now, shipping lists do go back prior to 1997, but we don't have them available in a digital format until 1997. That shipping list, though, this is where it comes in handy. It contains piece level or item level information for both monographs and serials, because obviously if you're shipping something out in a box, we needed to know, hey, the September issue is being shipped out in this box, and the November issue is being shipped out in this box, and so on. So in this case, this is one of those weird cases where shipping list information can work well with MarcRecord information. So I did mention earlier to not customize your query by your selection profile. And the reason I said that was because, again, FDM only knows your current selection profile. And item numbers change over time, as do your selections. They change over time as well. And since 2023, 2024, GPO has been inactivating tangible format material for the digital FDLP initiative. So let me illustrate what I mean here. If you are looking to weed or to inventory your paper format CFRs, you should note that the CFR had one item number that was used to profile for all CFR titles, and that was item number 0572-B. In January of 2022, though, the CFR was split out into 49 separate item numbers, one for each CFR title. So the item number 0572B was retired, and in its place we had 0572-D- and then numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, because we had split the CFR out based on requests from the community. Several libraries only wanted a profile for Title III of the CFR, and some of our federal agencies, for example, only wanted a profile for the CFR titles that impacted their federal agency's mission. So we split them out into 49 item numbers. And then along comes February 2024, when the limited distribution framework kicked in, and only 50 libraries were selected to receive the CFR in paper format from that point in time forward. So if you were to go into FDM and run a query saying, show me everything that my library profiled for, because I'm trying to create an inventory, the only time that you'll see the CFR returned on the search results is if you happen to be one of the 50 libraries that currently select the CFR. And even then, you would only see your receipts going back to January of 2022, and that's because that's when we started using those item numbers that you're currently profiled for. So there would be no listing of any CFR received prior to January 2022 received under that old item number, because nobody is profiled for that old item number anymore. So that's just an illustration of why, as ironic as it is, you're trying to shelf list or inventory your collection, you should really not customize the FDM report based on your selection profile. So I am in FDM, I am in the MarcRecords module. I'm going to quickly click reset because I want to illustrate this. On the sudoc box, I'm going to type AE2.106/3:, that is the sudoc stem for the CFR. I type a % symbol, which is the wildcard character in FDM. I'm going to limit my search to the paper format, and I say get mark. And here we see 53 catalog records in paper format for the CFR. So you can see that we have a paper format catalog record for each individual CFR title. You see that the title field only shows the 245 subfield A. It does not actually say the subfield B or anything like that. So this is not going to help you if you're trying to inventory or shelf list or create a weeding list, because all it is the serial level information. Let me change modules though, and I'm going to go over to the shelf list module, and we're going to rerun the exact same search, AE2.106/3:, % symbol, type a shipping list as paper, and click submit. And now I have 5,900 entries. And this is because I was not looking at the item number, I was looking at the sudoc stem. So this is a huge list. I can export this to Excel, and I have a pretty good head start on inventorying my CFRs. I may have CFRs that predate 1997, and unfortunately you're going to have to go through and manually type those. And I may not have received all of these CFR volumes, dating from 2023, 2024, but that's okay. It's easier to delete entries on a spreadsheet than it is to manually type out fresh entries for things that you do have on your shelf. So let's take a deeper dive into this. Let's say I am in the Bureau of Labor Statistics Bulletins area. That is the L2.3 area. I remember when I worked at the University of Maryland, this was a rather large section because there were a lot of Bureau of Labor Statistics volumes. So I type in L2.3:% symbol, again that wildcard, click submit. And for shipping list, I only have 27 records, which is a little bit surprising. Let me click export to Excel. And I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to flip over to the MarcRecords module, and I'm going to redo the exact same thing, L2.3:% symbol, format type paper, get mark. And I see 660 catalog records for this series. I'm going to click export to Excel. I'm going to open it up. All right, so on this record, we have the OCLC number, we have the record date, we have a title, we have an item number, sudoc number, URL count, publication type being a serial versus a monograph. You have a record type, this is all going to be text format. This is a record length and an ingest date. We don't need to care about those two columns there. But you can see that there are quite a few entries in this list. Some of them are for monographs, some of them are for serials and only have a top-level record or a top-level title and a serial sudoc stem. So the serials might not be particularly helpful for you, but these monographs in terms of inventorying and shelf listing will. And we're going to do something here. I scroll down to the bottom of my MarcRecords, and I'm going to pull up my shelf list. So this is the entries that were shipped out to depositories. I'm going to copy my shipping list date here, Control C, and I'm actually going to put it in the same column that has the date. Let me scroll up here and say View, Freeze Panes, freeze that top row. So now when I scroll back down, I can see my column headers. So I copied over the date there. I have the item number, which I'll copy as well. Go back over here. I'm going to go back and I'm going to copy down my SUDOC number, Control C, where's my SUDOC number, goes there. And then I'm going to copy down the titles as well. Now the titles are serial level titles contained in the shipping list, so that's pretty good title information. Just to make it easier later on, I'm going to quickly shade the shipping list information, because the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sort by SUDOC. So I select the column and I say sort A to Z, yes, expand it. And you see at the top here all of the serials sorted. And again, these may or may not help me depending on what my project is with shelf listing or inventorying or weeding. But when I get down to about row 180, suddenly I start to see monographic information. So you can see that these serials are very helpful. We've got title information, we've got full SUDOC numbers. This is very helpful when it comes to inventorying or weeding. When I get down towards the bottom, I start to see my shipping list information. Again, my shipping list information begins in 1997, so it's only going to be towards the bottom there. And you can see that we have shipping lists dating to 1997, and the last one was shipped out in 2008. But what I wanted to highlight to you is if you highlight the SUDOC column and say conditional formatting, highlight cell rules, duplicate values, we can see that we have the same SUDOC number on two different lists. We have one catalog record that we pulled, and we have one shipping list here. You have to decide what's going to be better for your project, the full title, the partial title, the OCLC number, or so on. So you may want to go through and deduplicate those entries. All right, so that was how to create a shelf list or a weeding list, or at least get a head start on a shelf list and a weeding list using two FDM modules and mashing the data up. The next project that we're going to do is how to acquire SUDOC call numbers if you have content but you don't have that SUDOC call number. And again, this could be used if your library is trying to offer material out on FDLP Exchange and you want to maximize that matching capability based on the SUDOC call number. The process in general is that we're going to go into FDM, we're going to use the MarcRecords module, and we're not even going to download the MarcRecords, we're just going to do that export to Excel because we got the metadata that we need in the search results display. On your end, you're going to run a catalog report, and your catalog report has to have the OCLC number. And from there, we can clean up the OCLC numbers so that the two reports match the OCLC number and return the SUDOC call number into your catalog report. So I will go over how to do what's called a VLOOKUP formula in Excel. It's called a vertical lookup, essentially is what it is. Some notes for you to think about is it's only going to work when your OCLC numbers match GPO's OCLC numbers. So if you happen to be working with a collection that predates GPO's catalog records, you're going to have a hard time of it. If you happen to be at a library that made use of any old catalog record out on OCLC, whether it was GPO's or somebody else's, I can only get you the SUDOC call numbers when it's a GPO catalog record. So if you use GPO catalog records consistently, good news, you'll be able to do a match. Keep in mind that FDM and GitHub, the metadata typically goes back to 1976, and I will get you a link to a tutorial. It's coming soon. All right, so I am in the MarcRecords module. Let me click Reset to go back to the beginning. Now I mentioned that when you come to the MarcRecords module, you run a query, and you typically could put your library number in, or you could look for paper format records. What I have done, believe it or not, is I've actually just clicked on Get Marc, which basically says, hey, show me all the catalog records in FDM. I don't actually recommend you do this unless you are ready and able to do this, because this search is going to take several minutes. In fact, it could take 10 to 15 minutes depending on the time of day and how much load demand there is on the system at the moment. Once you click on the Get Marc, it will take a couple of minutes to run, but it will actually run. You'll have your search results page, and you're going to click on Export to Excel. Now that will also take time to compile because it's having to compile a spreadsheet that's close to 1 million records in length. So just give it a bit of time to run, and eventually it will. what it will look like is what we saw before. We have the OCLC number, the record date, the title, the item number, sudoc, URL count, the publication type, mono or serial, integrating resource, that sort of thing. The record type being a text or not, the record length, and the ingest date. I have here a sample catalog report that some library sent me. So they have in their report, they have the OCLC number, the format, subject, title, publication date, edition, publisher. They have great information, but they have the LC call number and they have a Dewey call number. They don't have the sudoc. So if this is going to be converted into an offers list, they really, really wanted the sudoc number. And you can see that we have 28,000 entries on this offers list. What I'm going to do on their list, their catalog report, is I'm going to click on this format column here, and I'm going to click insert, because we are going to put a formula right here. Back on my Marc Records report, you see that the OCLC number has parenthetical information. It has the parenthesis OCOLC. But their catalog record, their OCLC number field, did not have that information. So what we need to do is we need to strip out that information from our report. So I copied the OCLC column over here on the side, and then I did a find and replace operation to say, hey, anytime you see an OCOLC parentheses, replace it with nothing. And that went through and it removed all of the parenthetical information, OCOLC. I'm not going to do it right now because it has to search 918,000 or whatever it was records that were in FDM at the time that I ran this report, and it takes a while to run. And then I would go through and I would do find any OCN and replace it with nothing, and find any OCM and replace it with nothing. And what we're left with is we are left with OCLC numbers that are just OCLC numbers, and this should be a match point between this report and the other report that the library created. So once I had cleaned up my OCLC column, then I copied the sudoc column over to the right side of the OCLC column. Then I'm going to select this, and I'm going to hit Control-Shift down arrow to select the entire two columns, Control-C to copy it. And back on that ILS report, I'm going to create a new spreadsheet tab, and I'm going to Control-V. All right, so I'm not quite out of the woods yet. Anytime you run a query in Excel, it is a good idea to ensure that when you're comparing two columns or two types of values, that the values are formatted the exact same way. This appears to be just general formatting. And what I strongly recommend doing is highlighting the column and Control-C. I recommend that you pull up Notepad or TextPad or any sort of text editing software and Control-V just to set it aside for now. And back on your spreadsheet, select that column and say, hey, this is a text column. Now it moved everything over to the left, but I can tell you by experience it doesn't actually understand that these values contained in the cells are in fact text. It says the column is text, but there's values superimposed over it. So I'm going to go back to my notepad here, and I'm going to Control-A and Control-C. I'm going to click in cell A1, and I'm going to paste it, but I'm going to paste it as text only. All right. So you see the little green arrows now in the upper left-hand corner. That tells me that the column is formatted as text, and the values that have been pasted into it are formatted as text. I've got to do the same thing over here on my spreadsheet. This is the catalog report. My OCLC number, I'm going to Control-C it, pull up my notepad, I'm going to delete the original OCLC numbers. Here's my catalog report OCLC numbers, set it aside. Back on my spreadsheet, select the column, and I say this is a text format. I'm going to Control-A, Control-C. I'm going to click in cell A1, and I'm going to paste them as text. All right, so again, I've got two text columns, and I've got the values pasted in as text. So this formula should absolutely work. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click in my cell B2, and I'm going to say equals, because that's how you tell Excel you're running a formula. VLOOKUP. This is a vertical lookup. I type a parenthesis, and now you notice that I have a prompt right below the box, and it says VLOOKUP. The bold text is lookup value, so that's telling me, okay, what am I looking up? I'm looking for this OCLC number. I click in that cell, and I type a comma. Now that I've typed a comma, it's saying in bold text, well, what's your table array? Which is basically saying, where are you looking for that OCLC number? I'm going to click down here on my new spreadsheet that I just created. I'm looking for the OCLC number here, and I click on it, and I drag it over to column B, which is where the SUDOC number is. And you see the marching ants. I'm going to hit Control-Shift down because I'm going to select the entire array. This is what it is. It's an array. And then I hit comma. And now that I've hit comma, my prompt up here says, okay, column index number. It's saying, okay, you're looking for the OCLC number, you're looking for it in this array, and when we find an OCLC number, which column do you want us to return? I want you to return the second column. So I type 2, and then I hit a comma. And now that I've hit a comma, my prompt says, okay, you got 2 options here for this range lookup. If you type true, it'll return a value when the OCLC number is an approximate match, or if you type false, it will only return a value when the OCLC number is an exact match, which is what I want. I only want exact matches, so I type false, and I type end parenthesis. Now there's one more thing I have to do. In Excel, when I'm running a query, if I type the query into row 1, that query will go to the right and it will look down for the values that I'm looking for. And that's great because that's what I want. But if the same formula is applied, say on row 500, the formula will go to the right and it will look down for that OCLC number, but it won't circle back and look up as well. I need Excel to look up and down in the entire array. This is my array right here. The way you make it look up and down, in Ashley speak, you make the formula or you make the array slippery. So how do you make it slippery? You add $signs in front of the column letters and in front of the row numbers. I can manually type that in, or I can just type F4. So now you see that I have a $A, a $2, colon, $B, $sign, row number. So this is saying, okay, we're doing a vertical lookup. I'm looking for an OCLC number within this array, and I want that array to be looked up and down that thing. When you find an exact match, I want you to return what you see in the column just to the right. And again, the $signs make it slippery so it looks up and down no matter where that formula is drawn. To me, the $sign actually looks like a water park slip and slide, so it looks up and down, it slides around. I hit enter. And in this case, it did not find the OCLC number in the FDM report. But if I click on that cell and I mouse over the lower right column, you see a plus sign. If I double click on that plus sign, it's going to draw the formula down the entire column. And there are many call numbers that it does not find, but there are many that it does find. So if I were to click into, say, this cell here, ed 1.8 colon F49/4, that's great. But when I look up here in the formula bar, you can see that there is a formula running behind the scenes, which means that if I try to sort this spreadsheet, that formula is going to have to rerun over and over and over again, and it's going to get a little bit cumbersome. So usually whenever I have successfully run a formula, I select my column, I Control-C it, and then under paste, I say, just paste the values. I don't want the formula running behind the scene, I just want the values. So now, when I click in cell ed 1.8 colon F49/4 in the formula bar, I just see the values. There's no formula running behind the scenes, and if I want to resort this list, no problem. It's not going to get tripped up or anything. So this is a way that you can quickly identify SUDOC call numbers. It wasn't a 100% success rate. Out of 28,000 entries in this spreadsheet, I think we had like 8,000 entries that did not have a SUDOC number. And of course, this is not going to always happen. The material that this library was offering tended to be more recent material, so we were likely to have catalog records for it. Also, they did use GPO catalog records in many cases. So there are still some things like here, you see some older material here that's not surprising that we might not have a catalog record for it, but we see like this is from 1994. Chances are, I haven't looked this up, but if you look it up on OCLC, this is a perfectly valid record. It's just not a GPO record. So it works in some cases, but the success will vary depending on the type of material you're trying to offer. All right, so let's change gears and talk about a very exciting tool called MarcEdit. Please be advised, this is not a GPO tool. It was created by Terry Rees at the Oregon State University. They have made it free and open to the public to use. I give you a link here to download MarcEdit. Long story short is it takes Marc files, usually you're working in a .mrc file format, but not always, but it can modify them. When you are modifying Marc records, usually what has to happen is you have to go through a conversion process. So you have to open it up, and then it has to break the file. It's called a Marc breaker file. And when you do that, the file extension is going to be a .mrk. But once it's in a Marc breaker file format, it's a mnemonic file format. That mnemonic file format enables Marc to do whatever you want to do. So you can modify the records, you can merge records, you can delete records, you do whatever you want to those records. Then you have to reconvert it back to Marc or recompile it back into Marc when you're done with your project. I gave you a link there to the training page. It's his documentation. It also has links to his YouTube site and things like that. So the first thing we're going to do is we are probably going to do the most powerful thing you can do with MarcEdit if you are a metadata user. And that, of course, is exporting a tab delimited file from Marc records. So basically our goal is to crack into the catalog record metadata, get that into a spreadsheet so we can massage it and do all sorts of analysis with it. The process is to obtain a record set in a Marc format, which we've already done, once through GitHub and once through FDM. We're going to run a program called export tab delimited. We're going to request Marc fields of interest, and that information will be imported into an Excel format and transformed as needed. I'll let you know at the outset that if you do this work often, it's worth your time to just go ahead and save your preferred Marc fields so that you can just quickly re-execute it over and over again. It will also require that you clean up fields to make them human readable. Remember, we're working with Marc catalog records, which are machine readable. It will put the data, the metadata, into a spreadsheet, but you have to make the metadata human readable. All right. When you are trying to do an export tab delimited operation, this is one of those operations where you have to actually open up MarcEdit first. If you have the Marc file open, there's no menu for you to go in and export the tab delimited. So you open up your MarcEdit. You can see that I have three operations that I regularly do that I've configured to just display by default. But if you don't have anything configured by default, just click on that gear icon and check the boxes of whatever you want to display by default. Otherwise, for the very first time you do this, you're going to go to Tools, and you're going to say Export, and you're going to say Export Tab Delimited Records. And it's going to say, okay, well, what are we doing here? And for this purpose, I'm just going to drag my FDM report down to that path there. And it says, okay, well, what are we going to call this spreadsheet? And where are we going to save it? I save it to my desktop, and I say, this is my FDM November all. Save. I leave everything at default, and I say Next. So this is where you tell it what fields do you want to see in your spreadsheet. So I could go in and I could say I want the leader, add that. And I could say I want the 245 subfield A, add the field. And I could say I want the 245 subfield B, add that field. And I could go on and on. So you can see all the Marc fields here. Whatever you want, you can add. Here's the pro tip. I'm going to quickly delete these fields. Get your fields into this box. Put the fields in the order that you want the columns to display in your spreadsheet. When you have that all configured the way you like it, go to Settings and say Save Your Data, it'll say, well, where do you want to save it? You save it wherever you want to, but give it a name that makes sense, something like MarcEdit, export settings, or something to that effect, something that you can remember and understand. Then the next time you are running this operation, then all you have to do is say, load your data. And it says, okay, well, where is your settings? Here's my settings. It just happens to be on my desktop, and it will automatically configure all of my settings so I don't have to keep retyping them over and over again. Once I've got my settings or my fields that I want in my spreadsheet set there, I just say export. And it says, okay, it's done. That file saved over on my other thing. I'm going to close this out and close that out and minimize this. I'm going to open up a spreadsheet. All right, so I've opened up a spreadsheet. On the Data tab, I'm going to go to Get and Transform Data. I'm actually pulling in a text file. It says, well, where did you save your file? I saved it on my desktop. It was FDM November all. I import it. And I'm going to get a prompt. It's giving me a preview of what the data is going to look like. And I say, no, this is not right here. I'm going to transform that data before it imports it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set this first row to be my headers. So I just check on the box, use first row as headers. And the next thing is this column in particular. This is the Mark 005 field. That is a timestamp of the last time GPO touched this catalog record and made a change to it. You can tell it does not recognize it as a timestamp. So with that column selected, I'm going to click Transform, and I say, instead of recognizing it as a whole number, I'm going to say, just display it as text. And it's going to say, are you sure? And I say, yes. And there I can see my timestamp is 2024-1108, which means this record was last touched on November 8th of 2024, and then it's got an actual timestamp there. So this is good. I can go in and I can configure all of my other mark fields so that it imports correctly, but for my purposes right now, this is good enough for what I'm trying to do. I'm going to click on that Home tab, and I'm going to say close and load that puppy because I've told you how I want you to import it. All right, and again, I caution you, this is machine-readable metadata. This is not human-readable metadata. So for example, if I am working with item numbers, I might want to go through and do a find and replace to find all the //$A, which in Mark language is blank blank subfield A. So I could do a find and replace to replace all of those indicators. You see here in the 086, which is the SUDOC numbers, I actually told the tab delimited report that I want the subfield A to be broken out from the subfield Z. And I do this because, by golly, when I searched needs and offers list at my depository, I got really tired of searching for, say, an I-29.79:H31 and being like, nope, I don't have this sitting on my shelf. So I would file a claim for it. I would get it in, and I would go to catalog it, and the catalog record would say, actually, the call number is this. So I put that call number on it, and I go out to shelve it, only to realize I have a duplicate because I had been searching for it under the old call number, but I actually had it under the new call number. So it can come in handy to break these fields out. In particular, I can tell you I've run reports to pull down large portions of the Y4s because I did a lot of searching for needs and offers in the Y4 area, and I could have, had I had this skill set and this tool, FDM, I could have gone in and say, hey, give me all the Y4s in paper format, show me all the old call numbers and all the new call numbers, and I could have gone through my collection and converted anything that I happened to have lingering under the old call number. I could have converted to the new call number if I hadn't already. Also, I could have put the old call numbers on a watch list to say, hey, if somebody submits to me a needs and offers list, don't search for these old call numbers because I already have them under the new call number. So these are just some of the things that you can do with export tab delimited file. You see here's the title field. I didn't say break out the title by 245 subfield A, subfield B, and subfield C. I just said give me the 245, so it squishes the entire title into the one cell there. I can do a find and replace to replace all of the 00 indicators subfield A's with blank, and I could say, hey, anytime you see a subfield B, just put in a space, and anytime you see a slash $C, replace it with a space or a pipe character or a comma. There's a lot of things I could do to make it a little bit more human readable. And it gets very interesting when you get into the 650s, which of course are the subject headings. So there's a lot of things you can do here. The next thing that we're going to do is we are going to split record sets apart by new records and changed records. So we heard loud and clear when MarcHive ended their services that some library catalogs are not able to process record sets as one file. So for some catalogs, when you import a record set, it will tell you we have 55 new catalog records and we have 23 records that we've set aside because there's a match point on an OCLC number or a call number or something that we recognize as already being in the system, so you need to go in and you need to review those manually to decide whether or not you're going to overlay or not. Not all catalog record systems can do that, so some require that you have one record set for new records and one record set for changed records because they're going to get processed differently. So I'm going to take a catalog record set and I'm going to do that split apart manually using MarcEdit, keeping in mind though that if you're in GitHub, you can get the catalog record sets broken apart by new and changed, but you can't. Of course, this is the pro and con of GitHub. The pro is you have it split apart by the new and changed, but the con is that it can't be filtered to your selection profile on top of that. The process is going to be we're going to open the file up in MarcEdit, and we're going to do select records for edit, and we're going to use some regular expressions to extract new from change. And I'll walk you through what that looks like, and then we're going to recompile that file into Marc. This time I'm going to use the GitHub file, and I'm just going to double click. You can see here it's a .mrc file format, and we got that purple stuff going on there. It will change color when we're working with a Marc breaker file. So it says, okay, we're going to do a Marc breaker operation here. It already knows the file that I'm working with, the GitHub November all, and it's assuming that the Marc breaker file should have the same name and also be located at the same location. I'm working with a Marc8 character encoding here, so this is all good. I execute it. It says 855 records were found. I'm going to go ahead and click on Edit Records. So this is my Marc breaker file. Look at the .mrk up at the top. So it's been transitioned into a mnemonic file. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on File, Select Records for Edit. And it says, okay, how are we going to identify the records to select? By default, it has the title field, but I'm actually interested in looking at the leader field. So I'm going to type LDR there, and I'm going to say import the leader fields for this record set. So these are all the leader fields. Now in Marc cataloging, you see 01230, and then you see an N. The N means it's a new catalog record. You see 01791, then you see a C. The C means it's a changed record. I can say flag down here. Anything that has an N, you just flag it. And it found 454 catalog records that had an N in it. You see I have N flagged, C not flagged, C not flagged, C not flagged, N flagged. There's a catch. There is a chance that there could be an N or a C elsewhere in the leader string. So if I really wanted to be sure to only capture catalog records that are new, I need to use regular expressions. Regular expressions are a way of, instead of looking for specific characters, although you can do that, I'm going to use coding to say I want you to look at particular locations within this string for particular types of characters, and I don't have to specify necessarily what those characters are. I always have to check the box for use regular expressions, and in the box I'm now going to say caret. That's saying, hey, I want you to start at the left side of the leader string. I'm going to type a period, which is a wildcard character. It's saying there's going to be some characters there. I don't care what those characters are. I type a curly bracket, 5 into curly bracket. That's saying there's going to be 5 characters. I don't even care what they are. But then the next character is going to be an in. If you find an in that next character, go ahead and flag it. And again, it found 454 records. That means that my original search of just plain old in found 454. When I searched by regular expressions, it also found 454, and that's because there were no ins located elsewhere in the string. If I want to, I can invert the selections, and now all of the records that don't have an in are selected, meaning the changed records have been selected. I'm going to flip it back to my new, though, by clicking on Invert Selections again. And I can say, export those that are selected. And this is okay. All that's left are your new records. So I got an in. I've got an in. I scroll down and I've got another in. There are only new records left. I have a .mrk file, though. I need to go up to File and Compile File into Mark. So on my desktop, I'm going to say these are the GitHub November new. Save it. And here we go, the November new. If I wanted to, I could close this out. I could reopen my GitHub November all, execute, edit, file, and I could do my select records for edit, and this time look for just the changed records. So that is how you can split apart new and changed. The way I explained it takes quite a while to explain it, but it's actually pretty simple once you know the workflow. The last thing we're going to go over in MarcEdit is how to delete older records by publication date. The idea being that there are many libraries that have no interest in catalog records for older material. And this makes sense. I mean, you guys know your users. You know your users may not need publications that have an older publication date. So if that's the case for you, this was a service that MarcHive provided for you. And to our knowledge, no other vendor at present is providing this service, but you can do this manually using MarcEdit. So the process is you're going to pull your record set into MarcEdit. You're going to do a very similar operation to what we just did, but it's called delete records. It'll have pretty much the same interface. We're going to work with the Mark 008 field, which has characters 7 through 10 positions. It will have the publication start year. We talked in part 1 how the 008 field has some pros and cons to it. In particular, you can find a more accurate publication year in the 260 and 264 subfield C fields. But for our purposes, the one field that is consistently used is the 008 field. So again, I have just uploaded the November all record set. I have broken it. It's in a .mrk format. Instead of going to File, Select Records for Edit, which would also do the same work, but is a little less direct, I'm going to go over to the Edit, and I'm going to say Delete Records, Delete Selected Records. And it's the same dialog box. The default, again, is the 245 subfield A. I'm going to change that to be 008, and I'm going to say import that string. So these are the 008 fields or strings for each of my catalog records. And as I already mentioned, you can see that the character position 7 through 10 is the start of the publication year. So it's 1974, 19UU, got 1976, and so on. So I definitely need to use regular expressions in this case because I can't just say look for 1974, 1975, 1976, and so on. That's too tedious. We are going to use those regular expressions so that we can isolate particular sections of the string, and we're looking for certain values, but I'm not actually going to specify every single possible valid iteration of that value that I'm looking for. I am only interested in publications that date from 2020 to present. So I need to draw a search string that will flag anything that is prior to 2020. I absolutely have to check the use regular expressions box. I'm going to say, starting at the left of that string, which is what that caret symbol means, it says starting at the left, I want you to look for some values. That's a wildcard character. And the first 7 characters, I don't care about. There's going to be 7 characters of some sort. After that, I am looking to flag anything that begins with a 20, and then it can have either a 0 or a 1 or a U, followed by any wildcard character. I don't care after that. Or, a pipe character is an or. Anytime you see a 1 character, or anytime you see a 20 UU. So I'm telling MarcEdit that I want to flag anything where, starting at the left side, there's going to be 7 characters. I don't care about those. I'm looking for it to flag a 200 character, a 201 character, or a 20U character, or if it starts with a 1, or if it starts with a 20UU. Then it needs to flag it. So I search, and it found 341 catalog records. So when I scroll down, I'm looking for anything prior to 2020 to be flagged. So yes, I've got a 1974, 19 UUs, anything that begins with a 1 in that particular location of the string is going to be flagged. And in fact, most of the catalog records that GPO put out that month have a publication year that's much older than 2020. So when I start to get down here, we find records that are not flagged. I have 2020s that are not flagged. I have 2021. Scrolling down, we see that I have 2024s, 2022s, and so on that are not flagged. So basically, anything that's been checked is older than 2020. I can say delete selected. So what remains on my list in the 008 field will be 2020 and more recent. Again, you would go to File and you would compile the file into Marc. In this case, it would be GitHub November 2020 to present, or something to that effect, and save. If you are perhaps interested in content that is 2000 to present, or if you are interested in content that is 1989 to present, I did that specifically for Tennessee, or if you're interested in material that's like 1950 to present or whatever, I gave you some sample regular expressions in the FDM tutorial, and I also gave you a link to how to get help with regular expressions so you can sort of create a custom cutoff date for the publications that are not of interest to you. So I do have some other ideas for how to use some of these skill sets that we just talked about, be it MarcEdit or be it working with Excel. We do have libraries that are trying to retroactively create collections in particular subject areas. So for example, there's a lot of interest in DEI and LGBTQ rights. And so there's a ton of subject headings, but it's very interesting to go in because you can use those subject headings to isolate pseudoc stems where federal agencies are producing content using those subject headings. And once you know the pseudoc stems, then you can profile for the corresponding item numbers. So that way you could get those catalog record content by profiling for it as opposed to having to do periodic searches for records that may have slipped through your selection profile. And I already mentioned earlier about the whole identifying pseudoc numbers that have been corrected by breaking out the subfield Z's from the subfield A's and that sort of thing. So hopefully the skill sets that we've talked about translate to other types of projects that you're hoping to do. I did have, in part 1 of this, we had somebody who said, hey, can we have a demonstration of how to set up tasks? The three things that I showed you how to do in MarcEdit came under the File, Select Records, and the Edit, Delete Records, Delete Selected Records, as well as the Export tab delimited. But to be honest with you, the bulk of work that most people do in MarcEdit actually comes under the Tools, where they are adding or deleting fields, building fields, copying fields, where they're editing field data, editing indicators, or editing subfield data. So this is the bulk of where most people are when they're in MarcEdit. And yes, when you're using these particular tools, you can go to Manage Tasks, and you can say, I want to create a new task, and you can give it a name. And from there, you can say, I want this action to be performed. You hit the plus sign, and you can do those adds or editings. And again, these things that you can link up in a task are all things that come under the tools. But you set up your actions in here. You can reorder them, and you just save it. Obviously, I didn't do anything here, so I'll have to go in and delete that. But let me double click on this. So what I did here was I actually swapped the 035. I put the 035 OCLC number in the 001 field, and then I went in and I deleted anything in the 001 that did not have a prefix of OCOLC. So basically, I was deleting the CGP system number because the CGP system number did not have that prefix in it. So that was a task that I created to play around with it. But if I wanted to run that task, that canned task, I could just go up to my tools and I could say assigned tasks, currently available tasks, and I say copy that 035 to the 001, and it will automatically go through and do it. But again, the projects that I showed you how to work with today, they are not available as an assigned task. It's only those tools features that are really available as assigned tasks. So sorry about that. If there's something that you want us to demo, by all means let us know. When you guys ask a question, chances are other people are also wondering the same thing but haven't taken the time to ask about it. So if you have questions, ask about it and everyone benefits, okay? And with that, let me sign off. Thank you for bearing with us. Apologies for the technical difficulties that we had during the live webinar. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly or contact us through Ask GPO if you have any questions. Thank you.